AI, write me an introduction to the virtual adepts of the role-playing game Mage the Ascension.
The virtual adepts are a secret society of mages who use digital technology to advance their magical abilities. They are the most tech-savvy mages in the world, and they use their knowledge to advance their magical abilities beyond what is possible for other mages. They are also some of the most secretive mages in the world, and they keep their activities hidden from the general public.
In the world of Mage the Ascension, the primary conflict is often presented as technology against magic. Joyless suits in mirror shades backed by the might of modernity oppress and hunt down the plucky anachronistic bands of wizards, kung fu monks, and mystics. Sometimes, however, the technocrats kick down a door only to be greeted with a cyberpunk gunslinger or mean-savvy hacker on a hoverboard instead of the old-school opponent they might expect. These techno-mages are, despite what some, traditionalists might think, often the most rebellious, non-conformists, and imposing of the enemies of the consensus. Even more than their allies in the Society of Ether, these awakened mages show that technology isn't just a force of stasis and modernity, and push said technology even further than the dreary unionist drones they oppose. I am of course speaking about the most elite of the traditions, the virtual adepts. I haven't made one of these tradition videos in about a year, and for that I'm genuinely sorry. It has been a hell of a year, for the world, but also me personally. While I've sat down many times to write and edit this video, I simply have not had the spare creative energy to do so. I do, however, still regularly check the comments, and it's pretty amazing that people are still watching the channel, having grown to over 1,500 subscribers. So I daily do hope to put these videos out at least a little bit more regularly than annually. And thank you to everyone who's stuck around. The book I released has also been seeing insane support on Storyteller's Vault, and has over 250 sales, which honestly blows my mind. And as we're talking about the virtual adepts today, I would be remiss if I didn't ask you to participate as a cult background for the creative effect of this video. So like, subscribe, and all that good jazz, as it lowers the difficulty on my meagre arete roll. Lastly, in this channel update, I've linked below a charity recommended by a friend of mine from Turkey, for a charity you can all donate to if you care to support the relief efforts of those affected by the awful Syrian-Turkish earthquake. If you ever have a pang to support this channel monetarily, or would like to support a real human tragedy, it would mean the world to me if you could donate anything you can. Thank you very much. But now let's get to the penultimate tradition that we have yet to cover, the most retro of the cutting edge, the surfers doing flips on the information highway, the tradition most likely to call the Hermetic Masters boomers, the virtual adepts. As those of you who watch these videos by now know, I like to start these tradition videos looking at the real-world inspirations the authors were inspired by to create them. The virtual adepts, more than any other tradition, have changed from the earliest incarnation in the 1990s. Digital technology and the internet have moved on so far since then, and the original inspirations for this tradition do not only seem outdated, but amusingly quaint. The 90s and early internet culture in general has a lot of pretty terrible representations out there, but personally I do quite like it as a character representation of a hacker rather than the reality. In the same way that our ideas about kung fu monks and pagan priests have more to do with the Akashics and the Verbena than the realities of both those things, leaning to the fictional portrayal of a hacker and digital expert tropes is just fine and often quite fun. The hacker is not the only trope that this tradition embodies, of course. Cyberpunk is at the core of the virtual adepts, and is what steampunk is to the Etherites. And inspirations like Tron, the Android universe, Ghost in a Shell, and of course The Matrix are all great other inspirations for technology-based mage ideas. Outside of fictional inspirations, digital technologies are moving forward and developing like no other in the real world. So what might have felt like an outlandish effect a few years ago might even be now run-of-the-mill. Technologies like 3D printing, drones, virtual realities, biometric identification are all now common and widely available. So when making a virtual adept character, research cutting edge and future tech and try to use it to inspire your effects and practices. The virtual adepts have a history with similar origins to many technomagi. As far back as civilization itself, women and men have set their minds to bringing reason, logic, and stability to the universe. Architectural achievements, bureaucrats, technological advancements, and science are all the cornerstones of these ancient mystics who paved the way for more modern technomagi. But even among these ancient mages, inspiration and flair was often just as important as utility and practicality. Buildings made to store grain were not just warehouses, but temples. Palace complexes were not just fortresses and centres of bureaucracy, but works of art and culture. Clay pottery wasn't just for storage, but also an expression of ideas and imagination. For me, this is the tradition that the virtual adepts are the inheritors of. Compared to their technocratic opposition, the virtual adepts still embody flair and this optimistic spirit. In history, as mathematics grew as a discipline, and alongside other ideas that would quantify and codify reality using data points and laws, a whole genre of magi were created. This again blended with mysticism, and many magical groups used things like sacred geometry, numeretics, alchemy, Chinese algebra, and other science and maths-based magics. The Order of Hermes, Solfacanti, Al-Batan, Ngoma, and many other groups use vaguely scientific magic as well, and to the masses, high mathematics might as well have been as good as magic. During the European Renaissance, the mix of Christian and Islamic scholarly teachings, both based in classical learnings, saw a great revival, and the Order of Reason grew out of this movement. Many scientific practices moved away from their mystic mirrors, and I won't go too much into the Order of Reason's formation in this video, but safe to say, mysticism and science gradually grew more and more balkanized, with mage groups who previously blended the two, or didn't even see the ideas as distinct, rejecting the practices of their new enemies. In the early 1800s, English polymath Charles Babbage invented the deference engine, a programmable machine that coincided with the foundation of the difference engineers as part of the Order of Reason. These machines helped enlightened scientists think in new ways, and they quickly became an essential part of the Union. Alongside these mages, the digital web was gradually being dreamed into existence. Although not clarified, I imagine it was originally a vidaire of the Umbra that scientific mages began to communally experience, but it soon became its own self-identified part of the spirit realm, and works of fiction such as Flatland are a great example of early ideas about digital reality. As a technocracy emerged from the Order of Reason, the deference engineers rebranded into the analytical reckoners, and later, in the 19th century, again into the virtual adepts. These mages saw the human mind as a tool for processing data and information, drawing statistics and probability from that data. A good place to start understanding these mages are the mentats in the works of the series Dune by Frank Herbert, who train their minds to be supercomputers and use them to provide logical and data-driven insight for their masters. These mages were usually far from the front lines of the Ascension War, and their keen minds and analytical approach meant that they were more clearly able to see what the Union was becoming in the early 20th century. They had very little desire for control of humanity, like the New World Order and the Syndicate did, and far less militarized than Iteration X and the Void Engineers. They also worked in highly virtual and theoretical spaces, and had no need to inflict misery and damage on humanity like many of their compatriots did, and a rift began to grow between them and the rest of the Union, who saw them as naive children, not pulling their weight and doing what needed to be done. That's certainly not to say they didn't participate in the Ascension War and the aggressive imperialism of the era, but it's a period when many awakened groups were all doing pretty nasty things. The Difference Engineers and the Guild of Analytical Reckoners also were much more eager to give humanity the boons of enlightenment than the rest of the Order, believing humanity was more than capable of absorbing and integrating their new concepts, while most of the Union saw the risk of advancing the consensus too quickly and saw control and order over advancement. This growing distance, and the continued contact with the Society of Ether, who'd already left the Union to join the traditions, left the virtual adepts to grow distant from the Union's goals. After World War II, the Union attempted to kill a powerful adept, the historical figure Alan Turing. In the World of Darkness, Turing actually escapes, and his attempted assassination was the final straw for the adepts, who fled the Union en masse. being helped by the Society of Ether and other sympathetic members of the traditions. After a brief probationary period, but with no little resistance from more staunch mages, the virtual adepts took up the vacant seat of correspondence on the Council of Nine, meaning that for the first time in centuries, the council was whole. The paradigm of the virtual adepts was pretty niche for quite a long time, with advanced maths, the digital web, and computing not having much influence over the consensus or humanity's imagination. With the rise of personal computing, however, and things like video games, the idea of virtual worlds and familiarization with computers was becoming increasingly relatable to regular people, and the Adepts paradigm became more and more commonplace. From the 2000s to the modern day, it's fair to say that the digital revolution changed the practices of the Adepts from commonplace to essential, with digital computing and the internet completely changing our societies. The virtual adepts first created for Mage the Ascension, a very 90s hacker, as seen in films like Swordfish and, well, Hacker. Personally, I quite like the retro aesthetic, and see the tradition looking back on that time with some affection. As with the Technocratic Union, many effects that would have been vulgar magic when Mage was first written, or even when Entempty was released, are now commonplace, as shown by the introduction to this video by an AI chatbot. Although not strictly just the realm of the virtual adepts, I think it's worth mentioning the digital web in this video and exploring why it's different from many other Umbral realms, or at least presented that way. Frankly, I'm not really in favour of this, and don't think the digital web really should be treated any differently from other Umbral realms, and you just need to add a virtual flavouring to it. In the Virtual Adepts book and the digital web's own book, there are various special rules and laws that apply to visiting and adventuring within the digital web. And although I do quite like a lot of them, and definitely recommend reading these books for inspiration, I wouldn't treat them as fast and hard rule sets. Instead, treat the digital web as you might any other highly themed Umbral realm, and take whatever creative license you need for your own game. In Modern Knights, the virtual adepts are pretty appealing as a mage faction, as their effects and foci are often powerful, coincidental, and able directly to attack the tradition's main opponent in the technocracy. The Adepts, in fact, offer a nice counterbalance to the perspective on technology, seeing it not as a tool of oppression and elimination of counter-ideas, but as a next step on humanity's journey of self-discovery and exploration of the universe. I've seen many interesting virtual adepts in my games of Mage, from tech gadget neopunks using drones from the computer like in Watch Dogs, to full cyberpunk hoverboard riding laser gun using badasses. I once used a faceless VA to offer plot hooks to the players through TV and radio glitches, with channels changing to create messages, similar to that scene in Shaun of the Dead. I have a slight obsession with making completely coincidental paradigm mages, and a VA who literally can't do anything outside of computer magic is one of them. I like to imagine them staying behind and following the rest of the game party through CCTV cameras and radio, hacking open doors, short-circuiting security systems, and providing support from a distance to their allies. It's a great example of how creating self-imposed limitations on a character can often make them more exciting to play. There are loads of fascinating inspirations to play virtual adepts in modern media and pop culture. Computer game characters and sci-fi characters are all great inspirations. While I usually push people to explore the visuals and styles of their characters in Mage, as it helps bring their foci and effects into a clearer light, I would say that with the virtual adepts, it can become very easy to leave the philosophy of a paradigm behind. And remember that all Mage characters have a deeper truth behind their effects and powers. For me, egalitarianism is a strong pillar of the virtual adept paradigm, and many can be activists of some kind, either opposing oppression, often the unions, or societies in general. Things like cryptocurrency, open access projects, copyright freedoms, piracy, and anti-censorship movements are big online spaces, and the virtual adepts are often at the cutting edge of these movements, at least in my mind. The paradigm from M20, Everything is Data, also seems ready-made for this tradition, and their predecessor, the Analytical Reckoners, radically championing that idea. But this largely ignores the highly moralized online landscape many netizens find themselves in, so maybe looking more broadly might be interesting as well. Practices as the easy parts of making a virtual adept, and a few interesting and cool ones are usually great to mesh together. Do avoid at this stage the quite lazy idea of having an app for that, or hacking any conceivable machinery. as if you're going to use computer science, I would look up and obviously push and explore the real fundamentals of that discipline. Instruments can sometimes be a virtual adept might also become unstuck, as having a unique computer instrument might just be able to about cover a lot of the online effects you want to do. Even for computer-based mages, I would try and add some creative instruments in there as well, like using energy drinks to increase your mental abilities, electronic music to focus your effect, or a variety of biohacking boosts to boost your physical and social stats. For less computer-based virtual adepts, gadgets and other tech are often great instruments, but are still used using knowledges and skills as focuses, like a scientific theory or engineering. One of my favourite virtual adept groups are the chaosticians, who are mathematicians who focus largely on probability and chance, and are, helpfully, masters of the sphere of entropy. This was in fact the first group I ever wanted to play in Mage, and although I did end up making one, the idea of a probability and chance magic always interested me, and I even have a video about how to use probability more easily in your games if you want to check it out. One of the main strengths and appeals for me of the virtual adepts is their use of the sphere of correspondence, even occupying the seat of correspondence on the Council of Nine, taking over that seat when they joined the traditions since it was left vacant by the Al-Ilbatan. Correspondence, as I'm sure many of you know, is an extremely powerful sphere, not just having native effects like teleportation and scrying that can make an unwary storyteller's life much more difficult, but also allows many other effects to be used at range. I use this sphere extensively in my own PCs in Mage, and it is an extremely fun and powerful sphere. It can also give the storyteller amazing opportunities for backlash consequences, and having to escape from faraway lands and make yourself back home can be a story in and of itself. Virtual adepts also frankly have one of the healthier applications of correspondence in Mage, with typically a set of foci meaning they must use the internet or at least technology to achieve their effects. As I've said above, I often think working out what your mage character can and can't achieve is important, and in my book, The Hermeticist's Guide to the Traditions, one of the flaws for the virtual adepts is the inability to work without magic, without computers and the internet. The sphere of data is the sister sphere to correspondence, although developed by the Technocratic Union, fits perfectly with the virtual adept's style of play and background, and I recommend to all storytellers to allow the virtual adept players to use it if they would like. Sphere only works when online, and having some links to the wider communication network like the internet or phone lines, or the virtual web. The main mechanical difference is the different links you need to establish to your target, needing information and, well, data on them rather than the normal familiarity. The other thing is the difference in time it takes to do effects. With the more dots you have in the sphere of data, the quicker your effects becoming. The former of these is very cool, and I would say the main benefit is lowering the bar for affecting total strangers whose information you may have collected en masse. My day job is in digital marketing, and believe me, it's pretty scary the amount of information we give up as a daily consequence of just using the internet. The latter time constraints of the sphere of data, for me, are not that fun and a little unnecessary. I really don't think that a sphere rank linked to the time it takes to do an effect, and I would usually just house rule that part of data away, I think. If you're planning on making a virtual adept PC or NPC, I would highly recommend it. They're great fun to play and often lacked like extreme specialists, maybe useless in a wilderness setting outside of a few gadgets, but genuinely godlike within the world of information technology of modern society. I would stress looking into character as more than a computer hacker though, and enjoy adding some extra flair to them. Thank you very much for listening to this video about the Virtual Adepts tradition, and this marks the second to last video in this series, with the next one and the final one coming up being the Cult of Ecstasy. As always, if you could like and subscribe, you really help this channel grow, and hopefully we'll see you on the next video soon. This has been the Hermetic Hipster, and thank you for watching.